Welcome. I'm Elizabeth Rojas. I'm the Cincinnati 2030 District Director, and thank you for joining us for our 50% Solution Series. Today, we have Skanska USA, who has joined us not only to present, but they're a sponsor of this event. So today they're going to talk a little bit about kind of best practices and what we can do to mitigate the impact to the environment through our construction practices, and even kind of the tools that facility managers could use in preparing for projects and so on. We also are going to be doing a little bit of a case study today for the Candida building, and we're joined by Myrrh Caplan, who is the Sustainability Director. She's joining us from Maryland, and Marcus Thompson, who is our local Cincinnati Skanska. He's the Director of Community Engagement. And we have Matt Williams, who will be talking about the Candida project, and he'll be presenting that from the project management standpoint. So we are thrilled to have you guys here today. Thank you for joining us. If you would please mute yourselves during the presentation. Feel free to ask any questions you'd like in the chat box. And if you'd like, please share yourself today. You can put your camera on if you'd like to. And at the end, we'll take questions. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Myrrh.
Thank you. And actually, Mr. Thompson, Marcus is going to kick us off. Let me get the screen pulled up here. Okay, sorry for the delay, it's thinking. All right, Marcus, if you will.
Perfect, thanks, Myrrh, appreciate it. Elizabeth, thank you very much for that warm introduction. Skanska, I speak for both Myrrh and Matt, and say that we're very thankful to be here and share this information with you guys and discuss best practices. But like you said, so my name is Marcus Thompson. I am the Community Development Manager, which simply means I am not an expert in sustainability. But fortunately, Myrrh and Matt are, so they're gonna actually talk about the more important stuff. I just wanna give an overview of who Skanska is, kind of broad, and then also for this region, just to provide some context, and then show you just a few projects that we've done here locally that have some sustainability components to it in regard to LEED. So, Myrrh, if you want to go to the next slide for me, please. So, right there, you know, there's some pictures there, but what you can see there is Skanska was founded in 1887 in Sweden. We are one of the largest project development and construction companies in the world, with over 35,000 employees. In terms of revenue, in 2019, we did in excess of $177 billion. So that's just us as holistically, I mean, large scale. I know here in this region, we've got a few competitors who are known to be larger than us, but when you talk about globally, we do have a pretty large footprint. So a couple of these pictures you see here, which are pretty cool, kind of show a little bit of our history. So that center photo is from the original foundation of the United Nations headquarters in 1947. So we took part in building that, which is pretty cool. And then that photo to the top right is where we worked in Egypt to disassemble and relocate, then reassemble the Abu Simbel Temple. I need to make sure I pronounced that correctly. So that's another awesome piece of history that Skanska has been a part of. Then Myrrh, if you want to go to the next slide for me, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so here in the U.S., we came to the U.S. In the 1970s. Our headquarters is actually in New York in Empire State Building. But across the U.S., we have about 29 offices from coast to coast. Cincinnati region being the youngest of the offices. We have about 65 employees here locally, all from here, from this area. Our main areas of focus here in this region are K through 12, higher education, commercial, as well as healthcare. And you can see a little bit of that represented in those pictures there. So all of these pictures that you see here, from the Fifth Third Arena that we did to Fairfield Local Schools Northwest, are either LEED Gold or LEED Silver. Something that we're very proud of in our partnerships here locally, that we really truly try to build for a better society in all that we do. And that's the extent of where my knowledge of all this goes. So with that, I am going to pass it to Myrrh and Matt.
Well, we've definitely done some incredible things there in the Cincinnati market, considering we are so young in terms of our offices nationally. So I love looking at these images because, you know, it's just so vivid, especially the elementary schools. It's always phenomenal on that opening day. So once again, Myrrh Caplan with the sustainability team at Skanska. And thank you, Marcus, for the kickoff. So I think some of this, depending on what role you're in, you'll already have a pretty good feel for the client's perspective. But I'm going to go through some things that really drove us in a particular direction, meaning more towards innovation, more towards deep green, and engaging our own strategies and you know, innovations for ourselves as well as our clients. So so when we're looking at that initial relationship and project with the client, we always ask ourselves what matters to them. I'm sure you do this as well. Is it clearly stated in their initial RFP? Is it overtly evident in their external facing websites and on social media? Or is this project their first opportunity to prove out a new brand direction? So whatever's driving them, the whole team is integral to that mission. And we've really enjoyed in recent years being brought in much more early in the process. For projects with high-level goals, we often start with a charrette or design visioning session. I'm sure all of you have participated in these over the years. Usually that includes a stakeholder and influence analysis. When I'm consulting for a client, because I not only do consulting to our projects, but as well directly to some of our clients, you know, when I'm doing that early in their planning, we may use vision setting to identify how to expand their mission statement or values, and to create a plan for how to have the project be a literal physical manifestation of who they are. Many clients lately have been, or you know, now are using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to set their initial goals, to conduct at least an initial materiality assessment, and to further grow their strategy over time, sometimes even becoming signatory to the Global Compact. We do that as well. We are a signatory and have been, we're one of the first companies to have joined the Global Compact. And we go so far as to conduct an organization-wide materiality assessment every 2 years to ensure that we're on the right track. It is no secret that buildings are responsible for nearly 40% of the carbon emissions globally. With so much scientific data and media coverage around climate change, this is another very common area of interest for clients as they consider their brand and their future recruiting and retainage of employees. Along with 4,000 other leading companies, hundreds of universities, multiple states, and many other entities in the US, we have committed to the Paris Agreement. So hashtag we are still in, right? This is often a commitment for our clients as well. You have probably seen this map or the data before from climate mayors, that more than 450 mayors around the US, which represents over 70 million citizens, I think, and more than 50% of the GDP, have committed to some level of climate-based policy change. And that means for us, every single market that we have offices in has already made this commitment. Some markets that we work in, here in dark blue, have made great strides and are already rolling out progressive legislation. So we caught just a few here on the screen. As a member of the technical working group for New York City's local law 97, I know that this is no small undertaking. This is a lot of work. It's a lot of effort to move a ship of this size. It also greatly affects some clients, some portfolio owners, and will of course push some innovations forward more than others. As you know, often a stakeholder, such as an investor or some other influence, such as a code requirement, will mean including certification in the project plan. This usually means LEED, as you would guess, or no, but it could also mean following the tenets of the IGCC ASHRAE 189.1, for example, which in some ways exceeds LEED, and in other ways just ensures that you're hitting the prerequisites of LEED, so it's a very good option. And often because there is a very progressive organizational mission or just a goal of being highly innovative, we see more and more clients pursuing net zero energy, net zero carbon, and even up to Living Building Challenge. And Matt's going to, of course, share the story from Condata here in a little bit. But we've advised on more Living Building Challenge projects than any other company in the world. So this is definitely in our wheelhouse, and it is very much a different story than a typical project. In all, what we're seeing with clients is doing less bad and more good. And I think that's what most of us, where most of us want to trend. But we're going to talk about the specific work that's getting done, that we've done, and that we're seeing clients doing to move in that right direction. So for our own 2030 and 2045 carbon reduction goals, we realized early on that we needed better means to measure our impact, and we realized we could not do it alone. We needed to partner, we needed to innovate, and we needed to affect the supply chain where we could. So here's our timeline, so to speak. When it comes to climate, our industry is responsible for 40% of energy-related emissions globally. So we're trying to tackle that as best we can. For the buildings we develop ourselves, we work on both operational and embodied carbon reduction, of course, but we also build highly efficient buildings, great envelopes, great systems. So much of that attention really is still on that embodied side of the equation. And that just happens, of course, to be our focus on the construction side of the business as well. So you may have heard of this. One of the, I'll talk about this in just a second, but one of the first innovations that we identified to help our mission was to create our own internal carbon footprinting tool that we use during construction. It's nothing fancy in terms of name, we just call it our carbon footprinting tool. But we did that about 10 years ago in order to evaluate our own development projects. And we continue to use that not just on those development projects, but for certain clients in order to track fuel, energy, waste, materials, craftsperson, transportation, right? So that tool already existed. After a while, though, we realized that we needed a means to identify low carbon options before design. So we conceptualized and seed funded a project in partnership with the Carbon Leadership Forum at the University of Washington to address embodied carbon. And as you see here, it's called EC3, the Embodied Carbon in Construction Calculator. EC3 takes material quantities from construction estimates or BIM models and matches the materials listed to third-party verified environmental product declarations, or as we all know them, EPDs. Here's one way that it's visualized in the tool. Each bar here represents the full range of embodied carbon in that building component. The light part at the top is how much carbon we were able to squeeze out of the project by making informed decisions. When we used EC3 recently on a major campus renovation, we were able to reduce the embodied carbon in the concrete on the job by 30% with no schedule or cost impacts. And that was simply through asking the market for EPDs. So whether they already had them or whether they needed to go and do them, just asking that question helped us to identify the lowest carbon option and drop the embodied carbon number for that client. The program itself currently covers EPDs in Canada and the US. Of course, it covers all of the envelope components at this point, as well as other insulation, gypsum, carpet, ceiling tiles, and recently we added all the wiring, which is a very interesting story because you can't fathom how much carbon comes to a building from all of the wiring that goes in place. It's very cool. And the tool is currently expanding into Europe. So European products will soon also be included. It integrates with, in terms of technology, integrates with BIM 360, with Azure, Tally. It also aligns with the Mindful Materials Library and Climate Earth's EPD generator. Another tool, let people, looks like, whoops. I was trying to let people into the lobby. I'll let you worry about that. Okay. Another tool that we saw as a need for ourselves and others is what is now called the Insight tool. And it is found on the ARC platform owned by USGBC. We collaborated with them for a few years to create this tool, and it allows all of us to search for what buildings are achieving in a market or even at a smaller radius. So we can change the radius down to multiple blocks, to 5 miles, to an overall market. And this is drawing information from GBIG. So if you've never spent time in GBIG, it is massive. It is the Green Building Information Gateway. And it's a shared site between USGBC, Department of Energy, ABC, and a number of other organizations that do any type of green building tracking. And so there's a lot of data in there, and it was a little unmanageable because that's what I used to use when I did research for clients, and it's just a lot. So what we realized is there's got to be an easier way to inform people of what's happening in a market. So in this case, we're looking at water reduction and waste diversion and comparing the project that is being designed with the market average. So this is the type of detail that you get. It can help to inspire a client to shoot for a higher goal, which, as advisors, that's one of our goals, is to push them. And for a consultant, just to be informed about what is progressing, what's become above average in their particular market. So both this tool as well as EC3 went open source at Greenbuild last year in November. And then we have a ton of other tools and toolkits. I'm not going to go into all of them. We've got everything from a CSR tracking site to on-site air quality monitors to non-electronic items, such as this IPD, IDP, whichever you call it, work plan, and of course, healthy construction protocols that we rolled out at the beginning of COVID. All of these with the end goal of providing more, looking at more considerations around durability, quality, occupant health, safety, ensuring that we have the tools that we need or that others need to be more successful. So those are just a few examples of where we saw a gap in both data and tool availability for owners like us and for our own construction clients in order to hit those goals. So I'm going to switch gears a bit and come back to the occupant health discussion because that is very pertinent right now. Marcus mentioned we're a big company. And both of us have mentioned that we're, owners as well as constructors. We employ thousands of people in the US alone. And studies done by IWBI, the International Well Building Institute, and others have proven out what is depicted here, or what is more recently referred to as the rule of 3-30-300, meaning that a building owner is spending around $3 a square foot on energy, $30 a square foot on rent and operations, and around $300 a square foot on salary and benefits. So it's very clear, and I think we've all known this, people are the most important investment that an owner makes. And we know, as most building owners do, that in order to attract tenant companies, we have to provide attractive spaces that bolster their brand and goals. This includes providing them an environment and amenities that appeal to their staff and future recruits. And us as an employer, we also want to retain and recruit the best talent. And we want to see the effect of satisfied employees flow over into their happiness, their productivity, lower sick time, and of course, better client support and happiness, because that relationship is better. So we provide them a conducive workspace. We, for all of our office, we incorporate LEED, we pursue and achieve LEED, but we also incorporate WELL strategies. And in order to be successful on both fronts, we believe planning for a health-oriented building needs to start at the finish line, like I said, the future occupants. This includes looking at the best choices around topics such as mental and physical health connection. So, something like acoustics, air quality, thermal comfort, and germ control all are part of that solution. And an example of a win-win there might be the use of spray insulation versus bat insulation. The reason being that one product or that one choice provides greater thermal comfort. It limits pests that carry disease or can carry disease. It greatly reduces allergens such as mold, and it provides sound attenuation. So it's a great option. On our development side of the business, we look at all of the considerations of well and fit well, and we certify our buildings to fit well. And then we incorporate those aspects that are most important to our tenant demographic. Those look at, those look at, the tactics or the categories that are listed here. And so on the construction side, we have specific tactics that we employ to ensure a healthy end product for those future users. And so I'm going to break out, based on these categories, break out some of the specific practical things that we do from a construction standpoint. So for the air category, we focus on chemical restrictions, dust control, material selection, moisture control and prevention. I'm sure you've seen this on all of your green buildings. So as I mentioned, we even have a mobile unit called the Insight Monitor that we developed with a university partner that constantly monitors the air quality as well as noise, and it sends an alert to construction staff if levels are nearing a set point. So once again, another innovation or tool that we saw was needed in order to meet the goals of the project. We work to have early discussions around opportunities to improve that operational air quality. So things like, I'm sure you've seen or even been involved with things like ionization systems. So like Atmos Air is a great option that we know to be low maintenance while providing maximum air quality. And there's a direct correlation between good air quality and the spread of disease. So it's very pertinent right now, and it is vital to engage better methodology. Likewise, we want to try and specify the majority of materials from those that have achieved environmental and health evaluations, like Declare or HPDs, so there's little to no off-gassing. For the water category, early engagement is important for a number of reasons. First, we need to conduct existing supply testing. And then if the tests come back and we need to look at space planning for the placement of any needed purification systems We need to look at clash detection for any added equipment or piping, as well as ensuring that any health-specific strategies such as touch-free water closet, faucet, or fountain controls are in good, operating or good, good control standing. A consideration here as well would be, it's not just the surfaces, but it's also how the design can affect health. This can be seen in even how a faucet, for example, is placed over a sink and how much wash water could be splashing up and leaving germs on the area. In this COVID era, with more hand washing and more potential of spreading germs, this tactic is particularly important. For the areas of energy and light, once again, early engagement, I'll say early engagement every single time on these because it's so important. This is needed to vet out methods and systems that we have seen success with on other projects, as well to identify what tactics provide results, with an eye still to return on investment, of course. An excellent example here is that we've installed on multiple projects triple glazing. It allows for maximized daylighting with improved energy efficiency. And then there's that additional win that daylighting is known to improve occupant mental health, and scientists attest to mental health being correlative to immunity to disease, of course. So that's a really good one. In terms of the community and mind focus areas, much of our concern is around the site conditions, but also installation of interior biophilia, and how we ourselves improve and connect with the local community. On all of our projects, we use our ISO 14001 certified environmental management system, which requires now, under the newest version of that, a holistic approach with proven stakeholder considerations and engagements. But we also work early on to identify stakeholders and prepare an engagement plan prior to the start of our developments or construction projects anyway. This is done, of course, in partnership with the client and has an added benefit for our project teams who then feel a sense of connection to the neighborhood and the rest of the team members. For materials, it is very much about having low emissions and providing the best aesthetic quality. So bottom line, the key is early and clear instruction during the contracting process on project goals and documentation requirements. And I'm quite positive all of you have worked through issues with that and have great tools and language in place in contracts to try and address that. However, I am going to let Matt talk more about that, and I am very excited to have him share with you the experience he and his team have had at the Living Building Challenge project at Georgia Tech, the Kin Data Building. So Matt, I pass the mic to you, and please let me know when to advance your slides.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Myrrh. Again, my name is Matt Williams, project manager with Skanska. And Myrrh, you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. Kind of building upon what Myrrh's talked about, some of our values that we have instilled in us and some of our lean principles is the plan, do, check, act. And we found that to be very valuable in pursuing Living Building Challenge 3.1 certification. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my professional career, and a lot of it is exactly this. It's making a plan, saying you're going to do it, and then you got to verify it, because there's a lot of times where those that help develop the plans from your subcontractor partners, they're not necessarily the ones that actually show up to do the work. They're not the ones putting the work in place, and so those are the individuals you need to reach out to and have touch points with, that they're just as apt to go to Home Depot and buy a replacement widget X to replace what is already had the utmost amount of scrutiny placed upon it before we ever bring it to the job site. So trying to catch those things, that was one of the best practices we developed, is just continual checking and verification of materials. Some of the simpler things in terms of a green construction site that we had on the project, though, were just common sense things. No idling. You have a delivery truck show up. They like to leave their engine running for 15, 20, 30 minutes while they're sitting there offloading material. Have them turn it off. It's it's a no cost. It's actually a cost savings. They don't burn fuel, but for them, that is helpful to the environment. And also, your delivery points for us on our job site, we kept them away from any air intakes or up close to the building. They delivered as far away as they could, so we didn't have to worry about any exhaust fumes or with that being off-gassed into the building. And then lastly, one I know with lead pursuits, this has been ingrained in everyone, is low VOC material. It seems like low-hanging fruit, but it's an opportunity to have someone make a simple mistake that is costly. One of the tenets of the LBC certification process is to perform multiple air tests on the project. And all it takes is one wrong material to start off-gassing, and you end up in this cycle of testing, failing, flushing the building for a number of days, and then retesting again, which can be very costly. Fortunately for us, we had plenty of fresh air with our design and able to leave the building open for a long period of time. So our air test actually passed pretty well for our post-occupancy test. So as we go into the early fall, we'll go into our pre-occupancy test. Our post-occupancy test will be in the early fall. And so we look forward to getting that accomplished and making sure no one wears any bad Axe body spray or anything that day that may mess up our test. You can go to the next slide, Myrrh. As Myrrh was talking about reuse of materials, again, going back to the lean principles, the plan, do, check, act that we try to employ on all our projects. This has a couple different elements in it. Some of the tenets that we had to achieve were reused materials for so many square meters of the project. And so in looking at our nail laminated timber design, we had initially started out with 2x6s as the complete system, spanning over top of glue laminated heavy timber construction. We worked with a design team and were able to determine that every other 2x6 was the structural member. So the intermediate piece in the middle there, as you can see in the image, was non-structural, was there for a filler to allow the concrete or media that gets applied on top of it a place to sit. So knowing that, we were able to work with some of the local Georgia film studios and a local nonprofit company that one of our team members actually helped to establish, called the Life Cycle Building Center. That's kind of like a Home Depot for used construction materials. It's pretty cool. Go in there, you get lost for hours. But we were able to work with them, with the movie studios, to harvest sets that had been torn down after filming had taken place. And they had lots of extra 2x6s, and we salvaged about 30,000 linear feet of 2x4s. And we're able to work those in where it made sense into the construction of these NLT panels. You can go to the next slide, Myrrh. So as you can see on the right, that's what it looks like when we're done. That's the 2x6 and 2x4 alternating member. They're built in about 6 foot by 10 foot 6 panels is our typical size. And so those are constructed, flew in place. But during the construction of them, as you can see here on the left, we had support pieces to keep the panels rigid so they didn't flex and break during the installation process. So we had support pieces, we had dunnage that separated the panels so that we could lift them with a forklift, and just general material management. So all that was extra material that we did our best to try to find a home for. So one of those additional homes that we found, go to the next slide, Myrrh. As you can see, this is one of our superintendents. He's cutting off the ends to make each panel a modular size. But there on the right, you can see where we had thousands of these little 18-inch cutoffs from our standard 2x6 or 2x4 length that we had from the salvage or from new purchased FSC material. So we had thousands of these pieces, and the question came up, what do we do with that? Part of our process, we go back And the last part of the lean process is to check, how can you be better? How can you do something different the next time? Even though it was perfect, how can it be more perfect? And so in doing that, we were able to identify these pieces as low-hanging fruit, and we use these for simple things like blocking in the building. In wall blocking, we had a variance that didn't require us to have fire rating in it, so we were able to utilize those materials as not necessarily free, but we were able to provide those to the drywall vendor who installed our interior framing and walls, and use that for blocking. That was just readily at hand whenever he needed a piece. There it was, had plenty of it. And if you go to the next slide, Myrrh. One of the more artistic ways that the architect was able to work these in is these are stood up on their ends, those same 18-inch 2x4s or 2x6s, and we took those with our mill worker and worked with them to create stairs as you go down through the building. Our building kind of terraces down as you move from south to north inside the space, and each of those different elevations of concrete, we're able to utilize these, and they're 18-inch at the tallest one, and then we cut them down and modularize those together to create stairs. And so that's just a simple way to look at the process, look at what you're creating, and the byproduct or the part that typically would just go into the recycling pile or even off to a landfill, and then look at how we can keep that from going somewhere and being reused inside the building. So Myrrh, if you go to the next slide. In that same light, on campus, the Tech Tower, if you've ever been to Georgia Tech campus, was built in the 1880s. It used wood products that you cannot find probably anywhere on the earth for sale at this point. So we had 100-plus-year-old heart pine construction, and they had a separate project that they were performing about the time we started the design for the Candida building, and they had to add an interior stair into the building. So they had to cut out existing framing and supports that was made of this very old wood, and we got them to salvage that, store it off-site in the warehouse where we constructed the NLT panels, and then we took those, had them planed down to the boards that were able to meet the size criteria for the design team, and we had a couple monumental staircases within the building, and we used those as the treads. So it's just it's another example of a little bit of forward thinking, a little bit of luck, having space to save these items and store them for the client we worked for. They benefited by their own ability to have warehouse space for the construction and the staging and storage of these items. But it was, again, an easy way to look at what you have, how can we use it, how can we use something that builds character. It brings the history of the campus. It connects these two buildings together now, that where you have something built 100-plus years ago that's now in this brand new building here on campus. Myrrh, if you go to the next one. What you're seeing here is a cross-section of the building, and as I talked about a moment ago, the south is on the right, the north is on the left. So as you progress to the north, you can see the stair step. That's where you can see it's an occupiable stair, to where not only do you walk down it, transverse it, but you can sit on it. It's more of a hangout space the way they've designed it. But that's where we installed the steps on each level. And then some of the other big tenets of the project that we tried to achieve was for net positive water and for net positive energy. You can see up top we had the solar panel array that was the design was called the porch. It created a porch design where the west facade had open air areas for teaching and learning. We had some large operable glass partitions that would open up and bring the space. It would kind of merge the interior and exterior together. And in doing so, we're able to have plenty of daylight for our healthy occupants, as Myrrh just talked about. And then also down in the basement, you can see where we have a 50,000-gallon in-ground cistern just to the right of that, Myrrh. Yep, right there. The cistern there, and then to the left of that is that's supposed to represent the composting toilets and the rainwater harvesting system, to where we are collecting water from the upper roof that falls, hits the PV panel array, we have a gutter system that collects that water, brings it back on areas where it's cantilevered off the roof of the building. It brings it all back to the roof, spills down, and then it goes through the rainwater process down all the way to the cistern, where it's then extracted out into the rainwater harvesting system. And then that water is treated, it's pumped into the 2 large water holding tanks that then feed the building for its water needs as it's going about its everyday use. And so right now we're in the process of getting permitted by the state for use of that. We had sought to get this permitted without the use of chlorine. So we went through 1 round of testing, and our numbers just weren't quite where the city was comfortable to sign off on the it being certified. So we're having to go back now and look at some charcoal filters as an addition, and an addition of chlorine into the treatment system to meet the regulations by the AHJ for the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia. So we're working through that now, but we came very close to being, and Myrrh, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would have been the first to successfully get permitted without the use of chlorine.
Yes.
I'm not going to stand behind that, but I think we were very close to being first if we were successful there. But
Yes, that's true.
some of the other, just I guess forward thinking from the design team and having them as partners on this, we had utilized all FSC material within the building except for the salvaged material that we were, of course, able to save from going to a landfill. And then the other big thing for the net positive water is the stormwater reclamation and preventing a runoff from anywhere on the construction site unless it's a 25-year storm event or greater. We had a system called a pipe bar system that we buried all around the job site on the west side that is basically looks like the big corrugated pipe in alternating directions stacked together at about a 8-foot long by about anywhere from 4 to 6 feet tall sections, and we buried those, wrapped those in filter fabric, and those became our underwater, or not underwater, but underground storage vaults for rainwater. So the rain comes, falls down, we have a permeable surface above, water filters down into these retention vaults, and it's held there until the groundwater is not saturated enough to then receive this additional water. So we never lose any of the rainfall that lands on our site. We are replenishing our cistern using that water for irrigation on the green roof as well as on the landscaped areas. And then also the stormwater is being collected and captured and recharges the aquifer there on the ground, on the job site as well. So it was really a neat process to see all these things combined just to capture water and to make sure that we're not losing one of our most precious resources on the job site. And then in addition to that, to make it a little bit more fun, we added in a gray water treatment system onto the project as well. And so we are collecting leachate, pumping that out via tanks that the companies use that as fertilizer and other ways to process that and reuse that material. And then we have any solid waste is captured in composting toilets in the building, which was pretty neat for our superintendent. He grew up with an outhouse when he was younger, and he got to put a new age outhouse in his final building before he retired. So he really loved that idea, and it was neat to see how all this is collected, and then for the black water is collected, and then the gray water that's collected from sinks and drinking fountains and the showers is collected. It's run out into a underground storage dosing tank, and that tank is the first layer of processing, and then it pumps that water around to the south end there on the right of your screen where we have a constructed wetlands. The water is pumped into there. The wetlands then takes that water, and it has plants that feed off the nutrients and other items that's inside the gray water, and it naturally filters that water and then runs out and then travels back around the job site to the left here where we have a series of half chambers that are buried underground there to then slowly let that water recharge the aquifer as well. think, Myrrh, if you go to the next slide, I think.
Oh, that's it.
Yep. No, I think the last thing, just living building challenge related, and as you go out there, Myrrh touched on materials. The biggest part of materials is trying to plan ahead, trying to make sure that you do the best to educate everyone, not just those, again, that are running a job or from a subcontractor or even the contractor's perspective from an office somewhere. You have to have touch points with the people that are actually putting the work in place, and that's where we spend a lot of time educating, doing lots of orientations where it wasn't just this is where the fire extinguisher is, this is where you go have lunch. It was, this is why we're doing this. This is why we are asking you questions on, is this marking paint? Is this approved? Are you sure you can use this? And making the guys think, because one simple mistake is it's overcomable, but it was more the education that we were able to take with these guys. And then towards the end, as we achieved substantial completion and got to have kind of a party with the whole construction team, everyone there they were excited and proud of what we were able to accomplish. And we're looking forward to full certification sometime early next year.
And Matt makes it sound pretty easy now. You know, he's talking about it pretty casually. I look forward to the Q&A because I'm sure everyone has some interesting questions about composting toilets and other pieces of that. I will tell you that Matt is a superstar. I mean, not only for this project, but we've had other clients that are pursuing high-level goals like net zero energy and others. And you know, unless you've experienced this and understand how everything is integrated, every decision needs to have the full team involved. And I mean, it's much more labor intense than a typical project. And so, you know, if Matt has any gray hairs now, it's because of this project, and he's earned the right to wear them. So, so this project, if you're interested in obviously asking questions, Matt will be available at the end. And then I would suggest going to their website, which is the Condata building at Georgia Tech. This image is an active image on that site, and you can click on any of these icons and see specifics around what they did. As well, if you want to follow them on LinkedIn, Sean Aurora, the client, and I will tell you, having an amazing client makes all the difference for a project like this. He has been incredible. He updates constantly on what's being achieved at the building. And so, for instance, today they posted some pictures of the honeybees that are making honey right there on site. And talked about the water that's being fed into the vegetables and other plants on site. So it's pretty darn incredible. And like we said in the description, once certified, it will be affirmed to be one of the greenest projects in the world. So thank you, Matt. All right, so just to close up a bit, I'm going to switch gears again and talk about operations. And not because we are a facility management service company at all, but so, you know, whether this is for a retrofit or new construction, whatever the project is, we've seen that early important step is also to engage facility management and maintenance, and you know, work with them to determine how best to ensure that what we designed and constructed for the occupants can be most effective and enduring. So once again, we do not offer facility management services, but we do use them, of course. And as a consultant to clients, it is imperative that our advice considers the future variables that operation brings. You likely know, the expectation in recent years is that facility managers will understand and employ a more proactive approach to maintaining their buildings. We think this approach should include stakeholder feedback and demographic health concerns. It should include data, and it should be flexible and ever expanding. It should also start off on the right foot, meaning it should have a full work plan or quote unquote proactive facility management guide. That should be drafted and then updated all the time as methodology is improved. So we have developed a proactive facility management guide for ourselves and our clients. This came about because there are certain certification programs that you can do this to obtain credits, points. And the more we dug in, we realized there was nothing out there that was comprehensively covering everything from green to, living building challenge level. So that includes all those elements, and certainly for today's more progressive buildings, it's a needed thing. On LEED projects, we would typically provide the facility managers with not just their standard O&M, which is the usual procedures to hand that off at the end, hand in hand with the commissioning agent's final report and all that. We also include all of the pertinent green aspects and how those credits were achieved. So for instance, a facility manager would know how to replace a low-emitting decorative wood panel in the lobby with the same or better product because they have that list of materials in their hand. For a health-oriented project, one that's looking for well or fit well, or one that has higher level goals in general, we also include information about things such as that water testing, the air quality testing, the care of any green walls or other biophilic features, and of course operation of things like the specialized sound attenuation systems. So in all, there's a lot of things we've blasted you with, but that then brings us back to the beginning of a project. Pre-design, pre-construction, the importance of having a clear understanding of the client's mission, having all of the stakeholders engaged, and having the best tools and the best experts involved. And with that, I am going to thank you for joining us and open it up for Q&A.
Thanks, Marcus and Matt. This is Tom. Wonderful presentation. We really appreciate you lending your expertise. Just to get the questions rolling. Matt, you touched on the gray water system, black water system. I would just that can be quite the sticky issue in different municipalities. I'm wondering if you had to overcome any particular local regulatory ordinances unique to that project that you might be able to share, that how we think about those types of challenges in the context of different governments.
Mm-hmm. What we did at Candida is we brought in the Fulton County was over the water system. We brought them in early along with the state of Georgia, and we kind of tried to sell them on what we were trying to achieve. And because this is kind of the first of its kind for the city of Atlanta, they were able to allow us to have a special use permit. And so we were almost a proof of concept for some of their thoughts, and we had some challenges getting past items such like the drain field. They thought the drain field for the half chambers was undersized just due to their normal calculations. They thought we should have, our building due to square footage was going to be using a lot more water, so we had to educate them on how we're using low flow everything within the building, and we're capturing our own water to be used throughout the building for drinking and for hand washing and everything else. So that took some selling on the front end, but they were excited. They wanted to see it succeed. So they really got on board with it. So they just had a couple key parameters, like I talked about briefly with the final operation of it, with the testing and the proving that it was going to meet their standards. We fell just a little bit short on that. And so that's why we're having to go back and retrofit to add chlorine into the disinfecting process. But we came extremely close. And so we've got another round of testing that's going to start here the next couple of weeks that will help us to finalize our permit and get us on a path of just normal operation.
I would just add too that sometimes you can't change their mind. So a small instance of 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, when we moved into the Empire State Building, we were the first tenant to pursue LEED, and we were going for LEED Platinum, and we put in waterless urinals in the space. It turns out back then, anyway, that was a big no-no. We ended up having to retrofit those to be plumbed because it came down to the city not wanting to fight the union or whatever. But we were trying to do the beg pardon later thing, and it just didn't work out. So around the country, of course, there's been a lot of code change and variances allowed for now in more recent years for those kind of innovative systems.
Speaking of the specific, David, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question? I'd be happy to read it for you if you'd like.
Okay. How long on average does it take the plants and filters to clean the gray water on that large project that you referenced?
I don't have an exact time. I don't know if anybody's timed a colored sample to see how long it takes to go through, but the pump is set on, the way the system is operational for us, it's gravity to the pump, to the dosing tank. And the dosing tank has a float switch in it. When it gets to a certain level, it pumps up, and it's supposed to pump a constant amount per day. And I don't know if I have that in front of me to know what that is, but it pumps enough that it allows the plants to have enough water at all times to thrive there that are plant inside the constructed wetlands. But I apologize, I don't have the actual time it takes for that filtration process to happen. Look for it. So.
Matt's looking for it. David, if you want to leave your email address in the chat box, we can try and figure that out with the client.
Well, we're right at 2 o'clock, so I will make a request for any last questions to our panel of experts, and if none emerge, I will go ahead and say thank you.
Thank you,
to
David.
Myrrh, Matt, and Marcus and Skanska for their sponsorship, and pass it over to Elizabeth.
Yep. Thank you all. It was a great presentation. Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry. I think I found what David's asking for. Gray water generation is designed at 566 gallons per day average, and then with the peak 850 gallons per day capacity. So that's how much it's designed to process. Whether or not it's doing that 24 hours a day, especially with the building kind of being on hold with COVID-19 right now, I don't believe so, but that's what it's designed for at least.
We did get one last question in at the wire, but Matt, I don't know if you could very briefly describe the HVAC system or any sort of remarkable characteristics of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I realize it's complicated.
Let's see if we do it. Well, I guess we have a combination. We have a normal DOAS unit that serves the auditorium as more of a traditional supply and return setup. But then throughout the rest of the space, including in the auditorium, we have a combination of radiant heating and cooling within the concrete slabs, as well as big ass fans everywhere. So we utilize that to generate this passive heating and cooling to where the building can be charged at night if it's during the summer and the outside conditions, so we have a cold front come through with storms and it feels nice and good and the humidity's low. It has windows that will open automatically, allow the night flush of the building to go ahead and kind of pre-cool the space, and then the system will pre-cool as it goes throughout the unoccupied mode. And then when tenants start to arrive during the day, because it's a very slow moving thermal mass that you're trying to move with the heating and cooling systems, it allows it to get to a point, and it's hard to move the needle left or right. So it's all about trying to plan ahead. It's tied into the weather forecast through the building automation system, and it allows it to kind of be intelligent and think ahead and know what's coming, so the building can kind of try to plan for what the weather conditions are going to be, utilizing all the tools it has at its disposal.
That's great. Well, thank you guys. This has been really insightful. I think it was really nice to hear kind of the large breadth of areas that you work in, and certainly all the tools that you guys have developed. You know, I think that says a lot that you're sharing those tools, and we just appreciate you guys being here today and sharing your insights. So
Well, thank you so much for having us. This has been great.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So until next time, thank you all.